Welcome to the Let's Run Fit podcast, the podcast that helps you understand all the different navigations and roads that comes to running and exercise. Today we are joined by Jenn. She is a run coach whose mission it is to help women fall in love with themselves while also achieving their running goals. She has a lot of clients who are actually pregnant or postpartum, so she has become an expert in helping people navigate those waters by working with their doctor to keep exercise in their schedule. So we're going to talk to Jenn today about how to do that safely and effectively while still having that little baby in the way. So let's get started. Jenn, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy that you're here to talk to us today about running when pregnant, which is something I personally have never experienced and, hopefully never will in my personal case. that is just not my dream. But if you could give us a little bit of information about yourself and your experience as a run coach.
Yeah. So I am a mom of two. So I've run through two pregnancies. My daughters are now 4 and 6. I live in North San Diego County, and I've been an official run coach. I got certified just over almost 4.5 years ago, I guess now. And then I've been running for about 12 years, I think.
Gracious, 2 pregnancies you ran through. Running's hard enough to me that I'm just like, I can't even imagine. Kudos to you. What inspired you?
You are, right?
It is. And it's one of those things. My sister has 3 kids, and every time I'm at her house, it's like, I'm like, I like my quiet house and my dog who just lays in the corner. What inspired you to really focus on helping women fall in love with themselves while also achieving their running goals? That's a very, I feel like that has a very personal connection.
So, like I said, I've been running for about 12 years, and I was always a mid to the back of the packer until recently, until the last couple of years. That was kind of where I ran. My first marathon was almost 7 hours. I had the marshals behind me telling me that I needed to clear the road, the whole 9 yards. The finish line was still there when I got there, but up until then, it was a very stressful experience. My second marathon was a couple years later, and I finished that in about 5.5. So I did take a significant time off of it, but I still, in terms of marathoning, you're still very much a back of the packer, mid to back of the packer at that point. And when I was 7 months pregnant, by whatever will of the world, I put my name in for the Chicago Marathon Lottery, knowing that I would run it about 8 months postpartum. Maybe not the best decision I've ever made, but I got into the lottery. And I decided to work with a coach for the first time when I was training for that race. And so I worked with somebody virtually who I met online, and I really liked her. But she was a very fast runner. She was a 3-hour marathoner.
Yeah.
I think she probably was working for closer to the OTQ when we had met each other. And so through that process, I realized that this was back in 2017. Things have definitely changed in the last 6 years. But in 2017, when this happened, there weren't a lot of people who were just mid-pack runners in terms of pacing who were coaches. And so there was nobody that was coaching based on people who had that time. Mm-hmm. Somebody who runs a 7-minute mile, it takes a lot less time for them to do a 7-mile workout on a Tuesday. I was teaching at the time. Versus somebody who runs a 12-minute mile. Most of the time, we just can't do a 7-mile workout in the middle of the week on top of everything else, right? Whether you're working or momming or whatever else dog moms, all the things. Having a social life, the little bit that you try and have when you're marathoning. So it was a little bit of realizing that there wasn't that. Like I said, I am a teacher, so there was that natural inclination to want to share what I was learning anyways. And then I mentioned I was also 7 months postpartum when I ran the race, and training while being a new mom was hard in a different way, but it also gave me something for me that I think watching a lot of my friends go through having kids, that they lost. And it was kind of forced on me because I had made this really big commitment to myself. So I think the combination of the two is kind of where that, yes, I want to help other women train, but I want to do it in a way that feels good for them at whatever level they're at and that fits into their life, even if it's not 7 miles on a Wednesday for their race.
Yes, and everything you said just now is extremely true. I am also a middle back of the pack person. I can win an age group in a 5K. I'm not really sure how I pull that off, but when it comes to half marathons, I am definitely the back. Like I have not yet to run my first full, and I'm still estimated at the moment with my times to be like 6 hours. And I think there is a lot of coaches that kind of forget that a 5 mile workout sounds fantastic. But for me, a 5 mile workout takes an hour. Well, I have some of my athletes that I coach that a 5 mile workout for them takes like 30 minutes. Like it's a huge difference in time. And I love that you identified that because that was something I struggled with a lot when I first got a coach is that I'm also a teacher and I would come home from school already mentally exhausted. And then it was this huge workout. And I'm like, when the heck am I going to eat? Like it just kind of turned into this spiral that almost put me to where I didn't feel like I was good enough until I finally found a coach who's like you and was like, okay, we need to adjust for you here. So like I love that you identified that and how important that is. How long have you been really focusing on women? Was it just after that kind of race? Like how long ago? You said 2017?
So this kind of whole thing happened in 2017 where I was like, this is what I want to do. But I was teaching full time, life happens. There was a wait list for coach, to do the RRCA convention to get my certification in an area near me and all the rest of it. So I didn't actually become a certified coach and start working with anybody until January 2019. So
Yes.
like a year,
RRCA is hard to get into.
Where I was
it took
kind
me
of
forever to find an online class that I could get into that fit in my schedule. So I feel you there. I feel you.
It was like a year of thinking and kind of sitting with it and kind of doing my own research and figuring out all the behind the scenes and just doing life.
That's what I did too. When I got to the RSCA class, I luckily already knew a lot of what they were telling me because I was having to figure it out while I waited to get in. With your actual clients that you work with, what is like this typical woman that you work with? Like if you could just describe like your average, if you combine them all together, what's kind of like your go-to client?
So I think this is really interesting because in terms of running, there is a large breadth of women that I've coached. I just coached somebody to her first BQ. And then I have women who I have coached to walk a marathon. I also have women who are just kind of sitting in that, I just want to consistently run and I don't really want to even run a half marathon. I just want to, get in 30 minutes to an hour for fitness, but I get bored and I want the accountability. So it's kind of a little bit across the board in terms of running experience. I think that somebody who in general works with a coach is a little bit type A.
Yes.
Because they like to have a plan to follow. They like to know what they should be doing to maximize their time. And then with that, I think they're also somebody who has a lot of other stuff going on. So they're working, they have pets, they have a busy social life. Somebody who has all the time in the world to train. And I feel like a lot of times wouldn't work with me as a coach. They would work with somebody who's really specific for, the distance that they're running. I don't specialize in marathon. I do, like I said, the breadth of 5K to marathon. So kind of in that busy life, wants to run and train and combine it with their lives in a way that works for them.
Just a little bit of everything. I love it.
Yeah.
So focusing more towards the pregnancy and exercise. I know a lot of women get very unsure about exercising when pregnant. I know there's a big fear in a lot of my friends when they become pregnant of doing anything, even if they were athletes previous, because they're just terrified something's going to go wrong. What are some of the potential benefits of staying active during pregnancy that a lot of women, I think, just aren't educated on because we still have that mental mindset that if we run, our uteruses fall out, because that was the mindset until like the 60s, which you don't realize how recent that was until you really put it into perspective.
Even more recent than that.
Like it was like 60s, 70s, I think, when Kathy Switzer finally was like, look, y'all, I'm going to do this and watch everything stay inside.
But when pregnant, it's been much more recent, even as early or as recent as when I was pregnant with my first in 2017. I was still told that I shouldn't do anything where my heart rate got above 150 beats per minute.
Driving down the road for me.
That was my recommendation. And I was like, I love my OB. I adored her in so many ways. I'm pretty sure I had a very traumatic birth. I'm pretty sure she saved my daughter's life, but I disagreed with her in that. And I did a lot of like being a coach and being an active person, I talked with other OBs who are not my OB about general recommendations, and studies since then, so just in the last 6 years, have changed a lot and have come out that like, no, if you were active before, you can keep doing what you're doing. It's okay if your heart rate gets up as long as you're comfortable and can catch your breath. If you feel completely out of breath and like can't, you know, that difference
Mhm.
between the type 2 fun where you're like out of breath and breathy versus totally breathless and you're like bowed over and can't force yourself to stand up and catch your
Mhm.
breath, you know, like that's okay to get to the breathy part of things. Um, so I think that that has changed a lot. And one of the things that I reminded myself most often when I was exercising and pregnant was one, to do what felt good. So some days you just don't feel good. You have morning sickness, which I had with my second, or I wasn't allowed to work out at all with my second for about 6 weeks because of some blood clots. So, like, do what feels good, do what your doctor tells you, but also you can still exercise and push yourself. And our bodies were made to have babies historically in the like in the history of humanity, and we were always active. We were hunter gatherers, right? Like that's the history of humanity. And so it's okay to still do the thing, even if it feels a little bit different now. And it's also okay to take a break.
I
Like I
think a
think it's
lot of
a,
people forget that when we were still in hunter gatherer days, the pregnant women didn't just sit in a cave and wait for the men to get back for like they still had to go do their part of getting everything together. And I feel like now we're just so used to sitting around that we feel like our reduced activity levels that we should have a little bit mean you just do nothing instead of, well, maybe not pick up the super duper heavy log, but you can still gather the like, sticks. That was a really crazy example, but you know what I mean? Like, like you can still go and do some things. If you are training someone who is pregnant, what is a way that you can kind of tailor the exercise programs to kind of help them with the considerations of their individual needs and safety that you have as pregnant versus when you're not pregnant?
so I think it comes down a lot more to having that open dialogue. And that's like a whole other side of coaching, right? And making sure that you're talking really clearly and openly about how they're feeling and different things, and knowing that in this season, it's not the season to push for a time or a distance goal. So accepting that the season you're in is something different and setting what your intention kind of for that season is. So is your intention in this season to stay strong so that birth is easier? Because studies have shown that the more active a woman is during a pregnancy, the easier
Mm-hmm.
birth and recovery goes. Is your intention to just keep your base up because it's really helpful for you for your mental health? Okay, so then that's going to be our focus. Is it that you have ran for weight loss in the past and now you're worried and have some of those body image issues, which I know a lot of women struggle with? So then how are we going to address that given things that your doctors told you and how you're feeling? Some of the tangible ways that we might do that in a plan are more easy runs, reducing the mileage in a long run, and then making it so that an easy run, just kind of the understanding that it doesn't actually have to be a run, which I think a lot of people struggle with in general, which is part of when I'm coaching anybody, I tell them, but making sure it's really clear in pregnancy that it can be a walk. Like it's okay.
Exactly.
Do you want to go on a hike? Do you want to take a walk? Like just get the time on your feet because it's still benefiting you. You're still getting the aerobic exercise and you're still spending time on your feet, which when it comes to being a new mom or race day, it's going to pay off because you did it instead of just skipping it altogether because you didn't feel like going for a run.
Exactly. And I feel like a lot of women are terrified that if they get pregnant, it just ruins their entire running future. But I actually have a good friend of mine who, just kept exercising during her pregnancy and she won a dang marathon like a couple months later, like a couple months postpartum, and she won the whole dang thing. Like, like you can still keep up your fitness. You don't have to lose everything. It's not 9 months where everything that you had worked for reverses. Because, like you said, you can still go and you can still do things and get the aerobic exercise. It just has to be modified, which is just something I think we're in a mindset as a country and maybe even a world that it's all or nothing. go hard or go home, and all of these expressions we have, instead of listen to your body, do what feels right. If you need a rest day, take a dang rest day, because so many people fight rest days. And I was like, that's my favorite day of the week. I love running, but rest day is my favorite because I just get to sit and know that I get to sit and not feel guilty. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm the weirdo, who knows?
With my non-pregnant athletes, I always tell them if they're not looking forward to the rest day, then we need to make the training days a lot harder.
Exactly. Like, I love my rest day. I get to watch TV and just really enjoy life and just no worries. I get to eat whatever I want and not be like, okay, so it's this close to run time. This is what I can eat. And this is what I need to have for like post run. Like, I can just eat. And I love just being able to eat without thinking about, when's my run? Is this going to digest in time?
Yes, no logistics.
No logistics, just food. When a woman is in the postpartum phase, so after the giving birth, how do you kind of incorporate exercise into a routine there? Because I know there's a lot of healing, because obviously like your body goes through pretty much a trauma in the process of giving birth, whether it's a natural birth or a C-section. So kind of how do you kind of incorporate exercise into that routine? I know every woman's going to be very, very different, but kind of as a general whole.
So I think as a whole, most people, most runners, because we are used to it, and like I mentioned, type A, and we want to get back to like life. I know that for me, I mentally didn't feel like myself when I didn't exercise. Like, I really struggled with that identity piece in the first couple weeks after that. I think we go back to exercising way too early, like go back to exercising way too hard, way too early. I think most of the time we need to take it back and wait longer and focus on more of like deep breath work. So like box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4 counts, you exhale for 4, and you hold for 4. Things like that are super beneficial, like especially in the first couple weeks after giving birth. And then pelvic floor stuff, which there's a commercial right now that it drives me crazy every time for like, I don't remember what brand it is, but for some brand of pad. And it's this mom holding like a 1-year-old and she sneezes and they're like, we've got you covered. Wear these pads. And I'm like, no, go see a pelvic floor specialist. Like, if you're
That's not supposed to happen.
Like, if you're still peeing a year after giving birth, like you need to go see somebody to work on like strengthening those muscles, because it happens. But there's also a point where you should be working, so it's not like an every sneeze sort of thing.
Exactly. So many women forget about their pelvic floors. Even like when you're not worried about birth, you still need to care about that.
Yes. And so I think that there's like, your doctor will clear you for exercise at 6 to 8 weeks usually. And then there is like studies now that say you should wait as long as 12 weeks to actually get back to like hard training, which is contrary to 10 years ago, 7 years ago, when it was like the bounce back body and how fast can you get to your paces. And this woman is running the OTQ when she's 4 months postpartum and things like that, which yes, they happen. But if you're waiting until your body is fully recovered, birth is a traumatic thing, 3 months to like really get back to hard training, you shouldn't be running a marathon then. At least most of us shouldn't. I'm sure there's always exceptions to the rule, but for the general person, the everyday recreational runner, you're going to need to have more time. When I mentioned running Chicago 8 months postpartum, like now I have the hindsight to look back and say that was completely ridiculous. Like, what was I thinking? I had no business doing that. I wasn't even that much of an experienced marathoner. Like, that was a dumb decision. So, hindsight being 2020, I wouldn't do the same thing again. When I had my second daughter, I didn't even run a half marathon for 6 or 7 months because I learned so much in those 2 years that I was like, what was I thinking? I'm never going to do that again.
This is a lot, but it's also really hard to get into the Chicago, even as a lottery.
Yes.
So that's probably part of it, is you're like, this was like a once in a lifetime chance. Like,
yeah. Well, and yeah, there was a lot that went into it, and I'm really glad I did it. And it kind of changed the trajectory of my life in a lot of ways. So I think it happened for a different reason. But yeah, definitely not the best, maybe physical decision. It was really good for mental and all the rest of it.
Oh yeah. When you're transitioning someone back into the exercise, like what's like the most common? Like, do you just stick with like the easy runs when like they're first cleared and it's really time you just kind of really start easy and kind of building that base back until it's time to start going hard? Because I know you said you got to wait a little bit before going hard. Is that kind of what the focus is the easy runs?
Yeah, just getting back to time on feet. And then, like I said, some of that, like the deep breath work, and then whatever, using the resources that they have to work on some of the core and the pelvic floor, things like bridges and exercises kind of in that realm. You could do like marching bridges, things like that to progress them, but that really kind of work in a way that's safe postpartum and complements running further down the line.
Perfect. I love it. I am sure that probably one of the most common things you have for women who, when they do come back postpartum, even though they understand like my body's different, I'm still healing and things like that. How do you kind of help with like some of the mental aspects of helping them come to terms? Sorry, my dog's going crazy over here. Helping them come to terms with the fact that their body changed. And that means their paces might change, some for the better, maybe some for the worse. It just kind of depends. Like, how do you really help with that mental side of it?
So I think part of it is just acknowledging it and talking about it. So as a coach, like I'm the one that's telling them the paces that they should be trying in workouts. So making sure that the expectations I have are clear and reasonable for them, that I'm not using data from before they got pregnant or even during their pregnancy as their benchmark data to set the paces for workouts, right? Like really starting from scratch so that they feel that way. And then being really open and honest for them, like having those lines of communication again open for them to talk about it. I think part of the struggle a lot of the time is that we don't have a lot of mother runners. We don't have spouses that also run, and we don't have spouses that will ever understand where we're coming from. So when we get done with a run that feels crappy because we didn't hit paces we knew we could hit a year ago, we're frustrated and they can't really commiserate because they're like, great, you just went for a run. I don't know beyond that, like how to support you. So I think having somebody who really understands and being able to talk with you about it is really helpful. And then one of my favorite things, actionable things, is to delete all of your PR information from whatever tracking you use. So if you have a Garmin, reset all your PRs so you're starting at 0. So then every time it's a new PR.
I think that would be great because nothing feels better than when you finish a run, your watch is like buzzing those stars.
Yeah.
That's just like you PR'd.
Yeah. And it's really discouraging. I know that like my, after I can't remember which of my daughters, my watch would tell me that I was running, like a 14-minute mile. And I was like, no, I usually do 12. Why does it say 14? And why am I walking so much? And I don't understand. And it was really frustrating. So to kind of get that boost, right?
Where you feel like that progress
that you like see it. And it's like, oh, and then it happens a lot faster. Your body does have some muscle memory from before pregnancy to come back. So you do come back faster if you have recovered and have given your body the proper amount of recovery. It will come back faster. So then you get those PRs more and more often, which is always fun.
I love the idea of clearing the PRs. I think that would be good for anyone who's taken a significant time off too. Because like Absolutely. I remember when I started back running as an adult, I still had all the data from high school.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to be a 6:14 mile ever again. I am fully aware of that. So I had to clear that because I realized I was chasing this unattainable goal because like I'm 30 years old. I'm not going to be running a 6:14 when I stopped running for like 8-9 years. Like, I'm aware of it. And when I cleared it, I remember watching the PRs hit for the 5Ks and watching my PRs hit for the half marathons. And you realize you were making progress. I'm no longer chasing that 14-year-old girl. I'm chasing myself, which is much more realistic. And that's like great advice for anybody coming back into a sport. I love that.
I tell anybody after time from an injury too, like any time where you've had to take significant time off, that's usually like the first thing is, okay, we're going to restart from ground zero, both with what we're doing in terms of, I want a new benchmark. I want to talk about this new things. And I want you to mentally reset too, like going from here forward. I even have a friend now who she still chases, like she just had her mom half PR. And so she still thinks of it like that. It's not my full half PR, but it's my mom PR, which still felt really big to her. So I think even, and her kids are 5 and 7. So I think even as we kind of age out of that new postpartum, if you were a really fast runner before having kids, it does take time to get back there because you don't have the same amount of time to dedicate to training.
Yeah, kids take up so much time.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like when I'm on the phone with my sister, she has to multitask the entire time because one of the three is talking to her in this ear while I'm talking to her in this ear, and I'll stop talking. And she's like, no, keep going. I'm listening to you both. I was like, how do you do that? How? I just don't understand how she pulls it off. It's so impressive. I have so much respect for anyone who is a mom or wants to be a mom because I watch it and I'm just like, oh, this looks terrifying. I can't do this. Like it's just, and I know myself enough to know to just, I know it won't happen for me. It's not going to work out for anyone involved. Whenever someone is either in the process of trying to get pregnant or they maybe just found out they were pregnant and they weren't super active before, what would be kind of a good advice if they want to start being active during their pregnancy because they know the health benefits? Because obviously telling them like, yeah, just go train, like that is bad. Because I know there is you kind of have to match what you were doing before. What advice would you give those people who want to kind of have those healthy habits during their pregnancy who didn't at the beginning?
I think that to start with walking, I think so, like in general, as a society, we forget the benefits of just walking and moving your body can have, especially for somebody who is sedentary to begin with. And then adding in like any sort of mobility work. So not even full on yoga, but like basic stretches and things, because as you progress in your pregnancy, things get really uncomfortable. And so the more that you've kind of given your body permission and let it stretch out beforehand, it's going to help. So things like that, I think, can be really helpful just to begin with. So, body weight squats, couple of planks, forward hanging folds, nothing that's like super getting you out of breath, but just moving a little bit, and walking is always a really great place to start.
Exactly. I love that. Because I think I've seen this happen to a lot of friends. They'll come to me and they'll be like, I just found out I'm pregnant. What can I do? And it's like, at this point, be careful. Like, you need to have started this before. Your body is adapting to what you are giving it, and you're already giving it this huge thing. You can't keep adding all these extra stressors. What is something you do for the women whenever they're postpartum, they just had a baby, and helping them find the time for their workouts? Like you mentioned, the time frame is so different. Like kids take up a lot of time. What's kind of some advice that you give any runner who comes to you and it's like, I don't know what to do. I can't seem to find time for these workouts like I did before. I don't know what workouts to do. Can you help me, kind of thing?
So I always start with workouts that are based on time, because especially when you're coming back to running after time off, whether pregnancy or an injury, you're going to misjudge time that a 3-mile run might take, right? So instead of it taking the 30 minutes that it took before you got pregnant, now it's taking 40, but you only scheduled for 30. So then you go out and run too fast, and now you're injured, or you're really frustrated because you can't get the 3 miles done because you only gave yourself a certain amount of time. So I always start with time-based runs. The other thing is that we have a conversation beforehand with my one-on-one athletes as to their lowest level of success. So like, what's the shortest run that you can do, the shortest workout I can give you where you will still feel successful? So I have some people that it's 15 minutes. If they go out for 15 minutes, they will feel successful. And I have other runners that if they do less than about 40 minutes, they don't feel successful. And so having that conversation can be really helpful to kind of see where they're at. And then sometimes when they say things like, I need to go out for 40 minutes or I don't feel successful, it can lead to a bigger conversation of, okay, hold on, but why do you think that?
Yeah, that's a long time.
Where did this number come from that's like your lowest success denominator? Like, let's talk about why that is and where that came from and if that's really true. So setting that bar for them and then telling them to get help. I think that a lot of times we are used to just going out and doing it. Like, I'm just going to go out and run because that's what you did before. And now you can't. And so it's not an asking for permission, but it's asking for help so that you can go do this thing. And most of the time, partners or parents or friends are happy to help. You just have to ask because people don't want to intrude with a new mom. They want to give you your space. But most people are happy to come snuggle your baby or sit there while they nap after you fed them. So things like that. Also, and then the last one is to just be flexible. I used to like put my daughter in a bouncer and hop on the treadmill, knowing that I might get 10 minutes, but it was 10 minutes I wasn't going to get otherwise. And so that was going to be at that. And she would like watch me run on the treadmill and she would sit in her bouncer and be happy as a clam with some toys. So I think that just knowing that, maybe your run is only going to be 10 minutes long and maybe you're going to get, or 10 minutes and maybe you're going to get 25. How long are they going to nap? You never know, but just be flexible with it and embrace that it's not always going to be what you want it to be, but something is better than nothing.
Exactly. That was actually going to be my next question. You ended up answering. It was like, what was going to be your advice for moms who've realized that they thought they had time and then suddenly the baby got sick, the baby woke up too soon, or, any of the other thousands of things that can happen when you have a child in the house, because that happens. It's the same way that women go to work and then get there for an hour and get a call from school and have to go home. You never know what's going to happen because you have this other little life that you're in charge of that, that normally starts to kind of encroach on your time a little bit, and how to kind of fix that. And you answered that perfectly.
I mean, I think a lot of those tips are the same, right? Like you don't always have to be my husband and I joke that I am the default parent, but he also can do it and he has had to. Like when I'm teaching, I can't just leave in the middle of the day to go pick up my kids, but his job is a lot more flexible, so he can. So I think that just accepting that it doesn't always have to be you all the time, even if you are that default parent, like it's fine. So that asking for help and then kind of, again, getting in what you can.
I love it. If any of our listeners wanted to connect with you or find you on like social media or something, how could they do that?
I am Misadventures of a Marathoner across everything. So that's how you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, my email, my website, all the things.
I love that. Misadventures of a Marathoner. That's adorable. I love it. I like that so much. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. I know so many of you listening, you're on your runs right now or you're driving home. So I will make sure that's there. So when it's safe for you to do so, you can go find her. I know Jenn is just a wealth of knowledge. There's so much that we can talk about when it comes to running while pregnant and postpartum that like I really had to sit down and think about what questions to really ask to kind of get to the core to help you guys out, because we could sit here for hours and hours and hours and hours because there's so many individual situations of things that could happen.
Yes.
Like we didn't even get into like how breastfeeding affects it and everything else. Like there's so many things.
There's so many like elements to it. So if you have other questions, I'm happy to answer them if you find me.
Yeah, go find her. Misadventures of a Marathoner. Like, it makes me happy just to say. It's just happy. I love it. But I thank you so much, Jenn, for being here and talking to us. And I hope you have a great day. And I hope all you listeners out there learn something.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, runners, for spending time with me and listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, please hit that subscribe button and leave me a review. I always love to hear from my listeners. And if you want more Let's Run Fit in your life, find me on Instagram at Let's Run Fit with BeLit. Until next time, runners. The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical or professional advice. Please always consult a medical professional if you're seeking medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The Let's Run Fit podcast is not liable for risk or issues associated with using or acting upon the information in this podcast.